Beth Ann Bautiste, thank you so much for being on Authors on Audio. So, usually to start things off, I just like to ask everybody, how did you get into writing?
Well, I've always written, but not stories. Like I trained horses for 2.5 decades. So I was writing for trade magazines and things like that. But I never wrote, I tried to write a couple of books in the past and I set them aside. I wasn't, I didn't really have it in me at that point. So, but reading is really what led me to writing because I love to read. I consume a lot of books and it inspired me to try to write one myself.
Nice. What kind of books do you like
Yeah.
to read?
Oh, I read a lot of fantasy. I read a lot of historical fiction. I mean, I read pretty wide, but lately, probably the last couple of years, I've really done a deep dive into like romantasy and things like that. But usually it's fantasy and historical fiction. There's an author that writes a lot of Roman inspired stuff. So it's, historical fiction type of thing and I just love that. I eat that up too. So all of it.
That's super cool. I haven't like gone down a historical fiction rabbit hole. Do you feel like reading all that book? I forgot to mention the name of your book is The Scent of Sea and Ash, and
Yes.
remind me of its release date. It's in June, right?
Yeah, June 30th. We've actually finally got a date. So I'm getting ready to,
Okay.
to reveal the cover and all of that kind of thing. But I'm not a very organized person that way. I just kind of jump in and do things. And then I'm like, oh, is that not the way it's supposed to go in order? So it
Yeah.
took me a while to get here.
I feel like as an indie author, like especially as a debut indie author, you have to just kind of throw yourself in and see
Yes.
where it goes.
It's the truth. It is. It's like jumping into a river. It's just like, this is what we do. And hopefully we get to the other side.
Yeah, I've learned
So.
so much interviewing different indie authors of just all the moving parts. It really is like being a small business owner.
It is. I mean, it is. I've always been self-employed. So I didn't really expect this to be much different, but it's so different because in my other businesses, it's all word of mouth. And this is word of mouth too, but this is subjective word of mouth. So you don't have like it's not everybody's gonna love your horse training.
Yeah.
But when I was training horses, I was like, I trained this horse and the horse is doing well. And people are like, I would like you to train my horse. So it was a very different type of thing than this. This is mind blowing, really.
Yeah. So do you feel like I think it's so fascinating that you are a horse trainer. That is so cool. Do you feel like that's influenced your storytelling in any way?
Well, it actually has. I mean, and it's funny because some of my old clients have read my arc and things like that, and they actually can see their horses in the ravens, and the raven and the eagle. So
Oh, interesting.
I kind of gave my rideable animals in my story horse traits, even though they're not horses.
Yeah.
So.
Now that you mention it, so I don't have a ton of experience with horses, but like now that you mention it, I can definitely see some of that. When I think of horses, you know more than me, but I just think of, they're kind of majestic and strong-willed, but they bond with their owners. You can definitely see that in the birds of the scent of sea and ash.
Yes, yes, definitely. I mean, there's the bonding, and part of it too is just the amount of trust that you have to give to this animal. That doesn't think like you, doesn't have the same anything process like you, and the two of you have to find a way together with no language, in common. So I like that aspect of the birds, the bonding of the birds and stuff in my book. So.
Yeah, it's so pivotal. It almost reminds me of like the relationship with their, I don't know what you'd call it, like their bonded animal. Like I know in the book there's a big thing of like you have chosen people. I kind of feel like you have the chosen animal too. Like what specifics of like training horses has influenced how you created those relationships in the book?
Well, it's interesting because there are going to be there are going to be dragons in future books, but I wanted to kind of give a different animal. Everybody does dragons, some people do griffins, there's winged horses, which of course I had to read that book because it had horses with wings. But I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I've always loved raptors, and I've always loved corvids, and I've always had birds myself. So I thought it would be neat to just incorporate different aspects of other animals into them to make them more like what people in fantasy read animals for. They're I wanted them to be animals, but I wanted them to be a little different, more realistic, but also with the fantasy bent.
Going back to your writing, what does your writing process look like? Especially, this was your first book, right?
Mhm.
So how did that look from starting with just like the little seed of an idea to having a
Mhm.
fully fleshed out book ready for publishing?
Well, I'm a scene writer. So I write in scenes. I don't write in order. I can write a whole scene, and in fact, it's also how I develop my characters. I can write a whole scene around a conversation or a word or a feeling, and I'm like, I want this in my book. So how do I write it in? And I just develop a scene around it. Sometimes and then I have to write to that scene or write back to the scene. So my poor editor. I'm not a typical writer that way. I write a bunch of scenes and then I write them together to make a book.
So how are you, if you're writing them out of order, how are you able to like connect them to make it fluid into a book? Does it just you have to go back and edit it, or what does that process look like?
Oh, magic. I don't know. I really don't know. Like it, because if I write a scene, then I have like an idea of what it looks like around it, and then I just build the story out from there, or back in from there. Like right now, I'm pretty much through with book two. I'm probably three quarters of the way through book two, and I'm having to write back to book one a little bit because I started it here and it needs to get back here so that it flows and makes sense. It's not typical. It's not a typical process. When I if I join a class or listen to somebody talk about their process, I'm like, gosh, mine's nothing like that. I hope mine's right. you know, but what you learn is that it's all personal, and you just get it on paper. The idea for my story, and I joke with a friend of mine, Pearl is my guy in the story, and he's the one who spoke to me first, very loudly, very, very, very
Mhm.
loudly. In fact, the scene that he described to me when he first spoke to me is not in this book. It's going to be in another book, but yeah, he's like he's the voice in my head. And then I have two other POVs as well. So
Yeah, Pearl was definitely my favorite character, and I think
yeah.
he's so interesting in so many ways. The first being, I've never read a book where the male lead is non-speaking. He uses sign language.
Hmm.
Um, can you talk to me about the inspiration behind that? Because it's good
Yeah.
representation, but it also makes for very interesting storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wasn't sure at first that I was going to use anybody with speech difficulty or anything like that, but I had a really amazing um time in college. It was my favorite 2.5 hours a week. I always tell people that. But I worked with a program called Writers in Special Ed, and we had basically that a group home situation. They would truck in and we would do therapy with horses. And sometimes it looked like writing, and sometimes it just looked like standing near them, or sometimes it was brushing them. But this group of people, they just really touched me. They were so brave, and they were so open, and they were so happy. And, to look from the outside, people might be like, oh, they live in a group home, and but they were a real tight knit family group, and they were just the sweetest, most wonderful people. And they definitely influenced me writing Brawny. And Pearl was kind of an extension of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved Bronny too. I thought the entire concept behind the chosen family. You hear it a lot in fantasy books, like it'll be like the found family trope or chosen family, but this felt
Yeah.
a lot more deliberate. in that the characters, it's not just kind of an informal, yes, I've decided we've grown closer, they become family. It's like a formalized, like, no, I have chosen you as my
Right.
family member. Can you tell me
Right.
the influence behind that? And also, I guess I would
Yeah.
add to that, why did Chess choose the people that she ended up choosing?
I'll start with why Chess chose the people that she chose. I think, she was a foundling, so she was kind of by design where they were. Lovey and Bronny became her chosen family, and Grammy, who found her and raised her, and that was a custom from there. So from the Orly area. It's not custom throughout the whole book to other peoples that we meet in the book. So I think that was part of it. Lovey and Grammy kind of raised her. They're just a group of people that came together and took on the responsibility of her. And that's why they became a chosen family. And I wanted to make it really formal. Um, like vows almost. Well, they are vows actually, but and I wanted to make it joyful, like Christmas. So, just to make it more of a holiday and something they do every year, so that they can remind themselves, every year, these are my people, I chose them, and we're going to go throughout our whole lives together.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really, really loved that part of the book. It felt just very special. And I think it does get mentioned in the book that they're almost like wedding vows
Yes.
in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yes, yes. And I mean and that was kind of my other thing. I was raised overseas until I was 14. So I'm a third culture kid. I didn't grow up in the culture that is listed on my passport. And that was kind of one of the things that I really enjoyed adding to my book was that different people will view things differently. So the people from the realm are going to look at the people from Orly and go, what are you talking about? What are these, vows, like husband and wife vows? That's kind of weird, your brother and your
Yeah.
sister. How do you do that? And that was one of my favorite lines, I think, in the book, too. What was it? Actually, never mind. That was in book two. I can't tell you, but it's one of my favorite lines.
Darn.
And it has to do with choosing and what it allows, as far as family, and how it's not as limiting as, say, marriage vows or a betrothal vow or something like that.
Now that you're kind of getting closer to having the book published, you've almost come full circle. What is something you wish you would have known at the start of this whole process?
Oh, gosh. There's so much. There's so much I wish I knew. I think the thing that I wish I knew the most was how long everything took. I had the story done and sent it off to my editor, and just really I didn't know what to expect. I'd never done that before. So I was like, I'll get it back from her. I'll make a few changes, and then right, we published. It's no big deal. And that's not how it works at all. I mean, just trying to get in line, to work with the people that you want to work with, and their scheduling and their process, and then their additions to your story. Even my formatter, not my formatter, I'm sorry, my proofreader made some recommendations, and I'm like, oh, I like that. So I went back and I made some changes, and it had already been edited. It was already like to the point where people were checking it for mistakes. And she came up with a couple of points that I went back and added in.
So it sounds like I haven't gone through the editing process, so it sounds like it's more collaborative and like you getting feedback on ways that in which the story can improve.
Yes, yes. I didn't know what to expect from an editor. So I started off with a friend of mine who's also an author. She actually she did inspire me. A while back, she inspired me. She writes historical fiction. So I had her reading, like she was my beta reader, alpha reader, beta reader, and we got to like chapter 13. And fantasy is not her bag. I mean, it is not her bag at all. And so she's like making recommendations for me. And I'm like, I need a professional editor at this point. I mean, I'm seeing that this is going to be completed. I know where I want my story to go, basically. And I need somebody who can be very like to encourage. I've heard some really horrible editor stories where the editors are not very encouraging, and they basically tell you to to rewrite without giving you any kind of, I don't know, guidance, I guess.
Mm.
And my editor was great. She was great. I loved everything. Poor thing. I mean, I am so bad at punctuation. Spelling is another challenge. And I sent her just like slop. And she's just like, okay, so I'm going to go through this 3 times. The first time, I'm just going to fix all your punctuation. And then the next time, we're going to talk about some plot holes. And then the next time, we're going to refine. So, and that was great. If I didn't have Marty, I don't know what would have come of that, the story.
It sounds really valuable, like to, kind of have that trained eye, like looking at the story fresh and giving
Mhm.
you that input. Because I think, I always say that I get writer's blindness, where you've read your story
You
so
do.
many times, you also get a
Mhm.
little bit biased, you like your own work,
Yeah.
that sometimes you need that external input coming in to let you know, like, hopefully kindly, but
Yes.
to let you know, like, hey, this is not quite working, but maybe you could do something like this and it would help improve it.
Right, right. Like she would ask questions. Like I feel like my writing style is kind of spare. I don't use a lot of words to get my point across, which made for a nice shortish book instead of 800 pages,
Yeah.
which I didn't want to write at all. But she would say things like, "This would be a good point to mention this," or elaborate, or tell me more. I love this. Let's take this scene further, and that really helped me to think forward instead of somebody saying, I didn't like this, or this could be better, or maybe if you went this direction. She never ever did that. And it's wonderful. Like I look forward to edits now because I know it's leveling up my story, instead of, oh,
Yes.
it's edits. Oh, slash burn, I don't feel that way about it now. I was a little concerned at first when I had my author friend helping me, because I was like, oh wow, because she's like, you have to have a tough skin, and I'm like, I don't want a tough skin. I want somebody to read my story and go, hey, this is pretty good, but what can make it better? That's how I envisioned it. And I know that my friend has had some editors that have, like, just ran her over and then backed the car back up over her. And I'm like, I couldn't have done it. I would have stopped writing. I would I would have never
It can
written
be,
for anybody again.
yeah, it can be so discouraging, especially, as writers. Like they always say, like, oh, you have to have a thick skin, but like if you're a writer, you're a creative. And in order to be like a
Yes.
creative person, you actually kind of have to be like kind of soft and
You do.
emotionally open. So it's
Hmm.
sort of this like, I don't know, catch 22 in the business of writing, where it's like you have to be able to like stay emotionally open to create these stories and still get this barrage of criticism that may come in once the book is released to the public, or maybe from some rude editors or tough readers. It's
Right,
tough.
right. Yeah, it is. I won't be reading my reviews on Goodreads. I
No.
I told my husband, I was like, you can read them, and if there's anything, viable in a bad review that can help my writing, I want to know. But otherwise, I don't really care about somebody's opinion. It's
Yeah.
my book isn't typical. It's not a
No.
typical romantasy read. And in fact, I wasn't even sure that I'd written a romantasy after I read it. And then I go online and I look at all the book talk people, and they're all like, "This is the definition of a romantasy." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know that I wrote one, but I think I did." It's just not your typical tropes.
Not your typical tropes. And that's actually what I loved about it, because I read so much and I've read my fair share of romantasy. When you feel like you're reading the same book over and over again, I put it down at this point. If it hits the same,
Yes.
like kind of those markers. It doesn't mean they're bad, it's just I've read it 5 billion times. So when I started feeling like your story was kind of, maybe turning left when most romantasy books turn right, that's actually when I got more engaged with the
Oh, wow.
story.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated that. I have another friend who's right sent me her arc, and it's same thing where like yes, it's romantasy, but it's not like checking the boxes, which
Right.
I
Right.
personally appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it makes it hard to market though because they're like list your tropes, and I'm like reverse orphan trope,
Yeah.
fated love, but really complicated. So I'm kind of I don't know if I've really messed it up for my marketing or not, but we'll see.
It can make it really brutal because, I understand like as a reader, I understand you want to like have those comps and be able to be like, oh, this book is like this other book that I liked, so maybe I'll pick it up. It makes it very
Right,
easy, but
right,
it it can definitely like, yeah, I mean, reading your book, I don't even know. I agree, fated love, but very complicated, and I
right.
love a complicated relationship. So I'm
Yeah,
very curious to see where book two goes. I won't spoil anything for anyone listening out there, but the
yeah,
ending will get you. I'll say
yeah.
that much. The ending will definitely get you.
That yeah. Yep. It's a little bit of a Sanderlanche at the end. Brandon Sanderson readers will know that. You get to the end of his books and you think, "Oh, my favorite character has made it," and then it's just he just dumps on you the last 100 pages or so, or 200 pages. And I kind of like that. And I didn't mean to emulate it, but I did a little bit in my book. So where there's a lot in the last pages of the book.
Yeah,
So
there definitely is. So, talking a little bit more about the book and the story, I wanted to talk about it's a scent of sea and ash. And I thought like your descriptions for the ocean and the connection to the ocean, I just was curious about your personal inspiration for including these really heavy ocean themes in the story.
yeah, yeah. So there it's kind of multifaceted, but since I grew up overseas, the 7 of the 9 countries I lived in were by the sea. So it's very personal to me that way. Like when we moved back to the States for high school, we moved to Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington. And every time we would drive over a hill, I would expect to see the ocean. It was really disconcerting for me for about a year, until I'm just like, oh yeah, there's no ocean over this hill. It's going to be woods or fields or something. So that's part of it too. And then, water is um, very healing, I think, for me, just just in general. I like to see it. I like to be by it. I like to smell it. I like to swim in it. It's just a very comforting and healing type of thing. And it was something that, because we lived in these different countries next to oceans, it was kind of a consistency in a non-consistent life. We moved every 2 to 3 years, my entire, life until high school. And then I went to like 3 different colleges. So I kept moving and I've kept moving still. I've lived all over the States, and I've been in the Pacific Northwest now for about 11 years, but I keep moving house. So I don't know if I'll ever stop moving, but it gets ingrained.
Are there specific countries that inspired some of these?
Yes, yes, and the people too. Like I put things, habits, facial ticks and habits, and like Chess and her chosen. They touch a lot. They stand very close to each other. They are very very locked in when they talk to each other and things like that. There's no standing at a proper distance or a comfortable distance or anything like that. So these are all things that I grew up with, and every culture had its different things. So like when we left Canada, I left Canada saying A at the end of all my sentences. When I left, the Philippines, I was pointing at things with my lips and my chin, and making a lot of facial expressions like they did, and picking up things with my feet. I mean, these are all things that just like you get you live there and you pick up on these habits. And so I took that and I just kind of sprinkled it through my story, so that everybody, all the different peoples that we visit and we learn about in the scent of sea and ash, have different habits. They're all different cultures. And it's I didn't want to have accents or languages or anything like that, but I wanted them to be from their own environment and have their own set of things that will identify them outside of their environment.
Came through really strong because I definitely noticed like with Chess, Bronny, and Lovey, they just had different mannerisms than Sarah went and Daplin. And then Pearl also has his own way of kind of being. It came through really strong, which I think it says something about how much a lot of the fantasy I read, usually it's from women born in the US, born and raised in the US. So you read the stories through that lens.
Right.
So it was cool to see, there was a lot of strength in how you didn't just create these different lands, you created very strong cultures that went with the lands. And I guess that would be a
Yeah.
reflection of your upbringing. I stalked your website a little bit and your Instagram in preparation for this interview. And the way you talk about your characters, I can see that you are so connected to them, and that they are so personal for you. Can you talk to me about the specific process of how you create each character? Like, say Pearl, for example, you said he was the first person to speak to you. What did that
Yeah.
process look like?
Well, I mean, with Pearl, it was easy because he just basically told me. I mean, it sounds absolutely nuts. I tell my husband, I'm like, he's basically a sentient being at this point. you know, he he just told me all about his culture and all about himself and how he looked and how he sounded and what everything was. I mean, just like that. And then for the other ones, like with Chess, so Chess is like my lived experience. So I just took my lived experience and I built a character around that. Let's talk about somebody who, you know, doesn't really get a choice and has to go on this adventure. And she's perfectly happy where she was. But then she's kind of a lens to see all these different cultures. I don't want to call her naive, but you just, she's open and she learns these different things as she goes along, and she does see similarities in these people, as she goes through her process of, on the adventure that they go on. And then, she needed a sister and she needed a brother, and so that was kind of how these things were built. Um, Older women have been really instrumental in my life, whether it's my grandparents or my grandmother or my great aunts or aunties that weren't related to me that have laid wisdom on me in some way. So that is how I developed Grandmere. And yeah, and Fenris is every man who's ever betrayed me. So that's pretty much my process, is doing something like that. And then I even built some characters around a saying or a vernacular that I picked up, from somebody else's family, or that some other culture, and I'm like, I want this in the book, so how do I put it? Well, I'm going to build a character around it because that character could say it, and I did that too. So that's kind of what it looks like.
Can you tell me more about uh the characters that are built around a saying? Yeah.
um Espen was actually around a saying. It was a Southern saying that I heard somebody say, one of my aunts or cousins or something, and they were talking about this person's temper. And they were like, you're halfway to dead before you know he's mad at you. He's already made this decision. That's Espen. And I put that saying and I built Espen around that. Somebody with a really short temper, you just don't even get a second chance. You don't even realize you've offended, and you're halfway to dead by then. So that was one character and one saying. Doesn't give too much away.
Yeah. That's I think that's such a fun creative way to come up with a character. I might steal that for my future writing and sample it because
Definitely.
that's
It's
really
so
interesting.
fun. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a list of sayings I want, things that are again, from other people's vernacular. And I'm like, I want this in the story. So how do I put it in the story? Do I have a character that can say it without it sounding weird? Or do I have to build a character so they can say it? So I don't know. I thought it was a fun way to create something.
So then what about Sarahwyn and Davwyn? They have like a strong relationship with each other.
Mhm.
Um, and they kind of come into the story and just really shake things up, I think, for Chess in particular.
Yes.
Uh, what was it like creating those characters?
They are kind of my internal. voice. Like she's my external living experience, and and Pearl as well. They're kind of my internal lived experience. And so I had to kind of split them up. I've got Pearl, who kind of embodies all of that. Kind of, because he has no voice, he is misunderstood, and people think of him
Mm.
a certain way because of what culture he's from. Even in the culture, he's kind of pigeonholed, and so that has been a lived experience for me. As a woman, as a horse lady, even. Um, so that's one part. And then like Sarah, he is kept from what he is, his whole destiny. He's kept from it. And I've lived that as well. So I built a character around that experience, where you really feel called to to do this thing. And you are unable to because of external forces or opinions or advice, well meaning, but still advice, that's not the way to do things. And I've never really been good with that, like the whole horse training thing. Went to college, got a degree, and trained horses. And that's not a usual way to go, but I told my mom when I was 10, I'm like, I'm going to train horses or I'm going to be homeless. Those were my two things. It's like I'm doing this or not. And so I did. And I've never used my degree ever, ever in my entire life. So it's that kind of thing. So that's how they developed. And, Davlin, Sarah he needed a brother, and they kind of trauma bonded, and that's how that worked.
This is kind of history there. I actually know a lot of people who got their degree and then just sort of went their own way and never used it again.
Hmm.
It's sort of a more common story, but it sounds like you knew you wanted to train horses like from a very young age.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a passion of mine. Yeah. And it was something that I don't do it anymore. There's a shelf life on that. You take a lot of hard knocks. I've got osteoporosis in my hips, so it's not a good thing. I don't want to take any more hard knocks and not
Yeah.
be able to function. So but yeah, it was a wonderful career. I really loved it.
Let's talk a little bit about the business side of writing. We talked about the editing a little bit. How has marketing and social media and all of those things you have to do as an indie writer, creating the website, like all that back end stuff, how
Yeah.
has that been for you?
Um, Not at all fun and not at all easy. I am basically computer illiterate. I mean, my husband makes fun of me, but I didn't have a computer till I was 30, and I never took a class how to use one. So, I mean, I just poke buttons, and if something crashes, I'm like, well, I'll just get a new one. I
Yeah.
don't know what to do. Um, it's so that part is, all the computing is really hard for me. It takes me a long time. Social media is really hard for me because when I first was looking at the questions you were going to ask and stuff, and it's like, how is social media for you? And I'm like, the first word that comes to mind is loathe. I loathe it. It's
Oh,
not true though. I mean, I do. In parts of me really, really hates it, but I hate it because I don't know how it works. I'm not really interested in how it works either. I mean, to be really honest, but I don't know how it works. So I'm just like throwing things out there. I'm just like, oh, is this what we do? Okay, I'll do a post like this or whatever. But it's very creatively draining, and it's very it takes up enough of my time that it makes me grumpy because I'm not
mm.
good at it. And I haven't figured out a way to be good at it. And I see, like, I have a Miles, he's a good friend of mine on Insta, and I've met so many wonderful people on Insta. I mean, I'm not knocking that at all. It's just the process of trying to be seen or recognized. I mean, I'm not even sure what word I'm looking for this, but just so that people will be aware that I've written a book and they might want to read it and they might want to buy it and they might want to recommend it to their friends. I really have no idea how that process works. And Miles, bless his heart, I mean, he posts maybe, I don't know, I think he posts in stories, and he might post once a week. And I'm just like, how? How? Because I don't feel like I can do that. Like, I don't know how to grow my following. I interact with people that, ha- you know, that I find something in common with, something interesting. I comment, lately it was all shares and reposts. And then I read something recently that's like, oh, don't repost anymore. They're going to ding you for reposting. I'm like, well, this is all too hard. It's too hard. I don't know.
It's such a struggle. Like it definitely, it just feels like it's a constantly changing landscape. And
Yes.
what, even with my own booksta, like has been struggling because I guess book reviews are not doing as good now. And when I go and I look at what's trending, it's like, just kind of like little memes where like you use the audio to say something. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. It's
It's
crazy. I mean,
just,
the whole audio thing, it's like, oh, well, this little sound is trending. I'm like, who cares? I don't mean that, but I mean, that's how I think. I'm like, well, who cares that it's trending? I mean, and who knows that and who picked that and why do I have to use it? That those are my thought processes and I end up doing it. But I just, it's like, oh, I watch other indie authors and they're like, oh, they're posting a little dance video or they're posting this video because this is trending. And I'm just like, I can't. I'm too old and cranky for that kind of stuff. I just can't do it. So I hope can find out, I can find a different way to market. And it doesn't just depend on Instagram. I'm hoping.
yeah, even though you form such a love-hate relationship with social media, but I feel like on top of that, even for myself, it kind of eats into your writing time too, like the
It
time that you would
does.
like to spend
Hmm.
working on the book, which is what
Hmm.
matters as an author. You have to spend so much time creating these silly little memes and making sure you're going in, commenting, responding to comments, posting on your stories, this and that. Like it's
Hmm.
just it can be so mentally taxing that even by the time you sit down to write, like your brain feels
Hmm.
all social media jumbled. It's such
Yes.
a crummy position to be in, I guess.
It really is. Like, it is very draining. I think there are people who don't spend as much time on it as I do because they're more proficient at it. They're like, "Oh, you can schedule your posts." And I'm like, by the time I make a post and then figure out how to schedule a post, and it's not that hard now. Now I figured it out and do that. Then I'm just like, gosh, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done for the day.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go work in my garden or play with my dog or, do whatever. Because it's a lot. It's, to me, I think it's a lot. I shouldn't whine so much about it, but my husband's heard it all. And my
No, you're
friends, I'm like,
definitely not alone. How you feel is how a lot of other indie authors feel. Like it's just sort of something you have to do. They'd rather be writing, but you're an indie author. It's on, the marketing is on you, and the best way to
yeah,
do it is through social media. So I don't have any words of wisdom, but I guess I can say you're not alone in in like feeling that the pressure is very, very real.
yes. Yes. Well, I hope all of us can figure it out, in some way that makes it more sustainable.
I do too, because I would love to I mean, I would like to see a future in which authors can move away from social media, but man, I don't know if that's the future we have coming toward us, but hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, or less, maybe not have the
Yeah.
expectation. You get those little announcements or little things from Instagram. It's like, you've posted consistently for 36 weeks. And I'm like, that's time I'm never going to get back.
Yeah.
36 weeks of this.
What is one piece of advice you would give to someone who is just starting their writing journey as a new aspiring indie author based on everything you've learned?
I'd say just do it. Just do it. Don't think about it too much. Don't worry that you're not good enough. Don't take too much advice. It's all conflicting advice. My fantasy writer author fans give me one bit of advice. My romantasy writer author fans give me another bit of advice. My friend that writes historical fiction, she has a whole another take on the whole thing. So take every bit of advice with a grain of salt and then just do what you want to do, you know? That's that's what I would tell people. Just do what you want to do and do it the way you want to do it. I had people saying, well, you have to have your pre-orders up for 6 months and you have to have all of these things in a row and your cover and all these different things. And I mean, I have just piecemealed this together. The story was done, it went to edits, and then I was like, oh, what do I do now? What should I be working on now? And everybody's like, build your following, build your following. And somebody said something to me the other day when I was worried about it. And I'm like, I don't know how to move this needle at all. Ads, or what am I supposed to do? And she said, your following doesn't necessarily sell your books. Because you could have 100,000 followers. They not might not be buying your books. So you worry about those who are going to buy your books and enjoy your books. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay. So that made me feel better. I don't know how to do that yet. Feel better that, okay, I don't have to kill myself trying to move the needle on my followers, and they'll find me eventually. People that want to read the book and people who've read the book will come look for me, I hope. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I think it's just sort of a brick by brick process. Because ultimately, it's true. It's not about making that number of followers bigger. It's about sharing your book with people so that they can read it and hopefully enjoy it.
yeah.
But yeah, everyone has an opinion, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And I mean, it's from their experience, and so we just all have such different experiences. We'll see how mine works out. But if for anybody starting, yeah, just do it and don't worry about it too much. Don't I'm that type of person though. I just jump in. I just jump in with both feet. I'm like, I want to write a book, I'm gonna write a book. And other people are more methodical and they're like, well, I have to learn and that's fine. That if that's your process, do that. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just do it.
Mm. Oh, my favorite question, this is always my favorite question because the answers are very interesting. And I like to ask every guest for the last question, it's what are the books and the writers that inspire you the most? Some of your favorite books, some of your favorite writers, what
Oh,
specifically what
yeah.
inspires you the most?
Okay, so and I'm going to even mention a movie because I just kind of drew from
Great.
everything. I am a Star Wars absolute geek. I just love everything
Nice.
Star Wars. From the time I saw the first Star Wars and then watched it, then begged everybody to take me another 10 times when it first came out. So Star Wars is my bag, and what I loved about it was the small stories, the human stories within the big story. And I feel like that's what I tried to do with The Scent of Sea and Ash. And every writer that I love, so in historical fiction, Diana Gabaldon, Outlander, I read her books all the way through, every one that was available for 10 years straight. Every fall, I would read her books again. And I mean, I've got them practically memorized by now, and I did that for over a decade, and I love them. Recently, within the last year, I read Pierce Brown and Red Rising, and I was just like, well, he's God tier, right up here next to Diana Gabaldon.
One of my favorites. Love Red Rising.
Yes, it's just so fantastic. And again, the character work, and the small little details in the stories. I noticed the little things. I think I did a reel a while back about Severo and the candy bar scene, and I'm like, that stuck with me. I mean, all the beautiful things do stick with me, but that one was very visceral because I could just totally picture it. I could picture everything that happened, and I loved it. Nicholas Eames wrote Kings of the Wild, and Bloody Rose, I think, is book two, and that's all he's written. And I'm just like, where does he live? Because I'd like to go to his house and say, please, please write more. I love your stuff. Frederick Bachman is another of my favorites. He wrote Beartown and A Man Called Ove. I love everything he writes. I'll read. He could write on a napkin. I'll read it. Beautiful writing. And then from way back, I haven't really read anything like this recently, but Barbara Kingsolver was one of my favorites as well in any of her books. And I don't know what you'd call that now. I guess they're calling it lit fic or something. I don't know. I don't know all the terms, but it's not fantasy and it's not romantasy. It's real stories, real storytelling.
Yeah.
Different. I mean, I don't mean real, but I mean they're not fantasy based. So yeah. So those are my big ones. It's funny, I only buy books that I know I'm gonna reread. And
Mm.
I have a couple of indie authors I'm just gonna mention too that I love their books. So I mentioned Miles Lyon, Price of Fear. That is brilliant. It's a grim dark fantasy. Loved it. And Cello's Gate, Maurice Africh. He's the one actually who turned me on to Kings of the Wild. He talked about Nicholas Eames so much. I'm like, I've got to go read his books. I loved Maurice's book. I'm going to go read it, and that was very good as well. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I'm just now getting into John Gwen. I've loved the Bloodsworn Saga. And then Jay Kristoff, I just finished the Empire of the Vampire series. One of my artists recommended it to me. She's like, "You're gonna love it," and I did. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. So I read really wide, as you can see. I'm just like real
Yeah.
scattered, but I'm like, what romantasy have I read recently that's really good? My favorite Carissa Broadbent was Daughter of New Worlds.
Oh yeah.
That, yeah. I mean, and I know she's known for that was like her indie published one, but I love that so much. There was so much in it. There was cultures, there was, your typical romantasy tropes as well. But that was a fun one.
It definitely sounds like you read a wide range of books, which I think is great. I think that informs you as a writer and helps you to create something like completely unique and completely your own.
Yes, yes. Like I said, I mean, if I didn't read, I would never have written. And I've
Yep.
been reading for, my mom read to me, so I've been reading from before I could read, I've been reading.
Beth Ann Bautiste, thank you so much for being on Authors on Audio. Everyone, go pick up a copy of The Scent of Sea and Ash, released on June 30th. So, everyone, make sure you pick up your copy. Beth, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.